It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today I want to talk about ZoneMinder. So in the past I've talked about Shinobi, and I've talked about MotionEye OS, and just using things in general to get video footage. You can use Home Assistant as well. But today I want to talk about ZoneMinder. I've just recently put this in for a client, and I found it to be a really terrific piece of software. It is extremely powerful. It is really well built. I like what they're doing with it. They do have some changes coming soon, so I wanted to talk about some of those today. And the way we're going to do this install is in a container, but it's going to be an LXC container, and I'm going to use Ubuntu 2004 as the base, or excuse me, I'm going to use Debian Bullseye as the base. And the reason that we're not going to use Docker, I'll kind of go through here in just a minute, and I'll do a video later on Docker, so you'll understand why here in just a minute. So we're going to get into the whys and the hows, and then the install and the setup, and kind of getting things ready in just a minute. I want to say thank you to all of my patrons over at Patreon and my subscribers on YouTube. Thank you so much for all of your support. I love doing this channel. I love making this media and this content for you. I hope you enjoy it as well. I do post all of the videos now over at Patreon after one of my patrons made the suggestion, and I don't know why it didn't dawn on me before that. But if you're interested in seeing them through Patreon and getting a notification through Patreon instead of through YouTube, or hoping that YouTube's algorithms happens to show it to you, jump over and become a supporter on Patreon, patreon.com. I've got the links in the description and the show notes. I appreciate your support. Thank you so much. So when we talk about CCTV or any kind of camera viewing capabilities, whether it's your home or your business or your offices or your property or anything like that, you want something that's pretty trustworthy and something that you can host yourself if at all possible. Now, there's plenty of paid options out there that are really good. Blue Iris is one that is a Windows specific system, but from what I've seen, it's really good. It's very powerful. It's got a lot of capabilities, and if you're looking for something that's a little bit easier to install and can do some camera detection and things like that, then that may be the one you want to look for. Blue Iris is the name of it. I don't know how much it costs. It's proprietary. It is not open source. So personally, it's not something I want to use. In my case, I do want to find something open source, and I tend to look for the open source options. And really the best options that have been out there for a long time are things like Shinobi and ZoneMinder. And ZoneMinder's been out there for a long time. It's still got active development going on, which is great. And they've got some new things coming here pretty soon in 2022. So I wanted to talk about that as well. So when we start looking at it, they've got a really amazing wiki that you can go to and check out. And when you look for the Docker stuff, it'll tell you here's a couple of different Docker images you can use. And if you open these up, you'll see that the first thing you read is that it's going to be deprecated. And it's not that they're deprecating the entire Docker image, which is 1.36. It's that they know that there are some changes coming from ZoneMinder and the way that they handle events and things like that. And they want to redo the Docker image after that comes out. And this is supposed to end in 2021. So here in early 2022, hopefully the development's being done and you'll see a new Docker image available soon. I just didn't want to do something that's on a Docker image that's going to be deprecated. But if you're interested, you can go and get this still today. You can run it in Docker still today. And a lot of these options you'll see whenever we run this in the UI and when we run it in the container, the LXC container we're going to use. And really you can run this on Ubuntu 2004 running as a VM. You can run this on Ubuntu 2004 running installed. You can run this on Debian Bullseye in a VM or Debian Bullseye installed. I'm just going to put it in a container because I find that the LXC containers are much better on resource usage. And if you go out to Scottibyte and his channel, you'll see a lot on LXC and LXD and what you can do with those things. He's just got tons and tons of content, and he really kind of brings up what the pros and cons are between LXC and LXD containers versus Docker containers, and he really kind of shows you a lot of that so you can make better and informed decisions. I like Docker. I love to go that direction, but for this one, definitely, when I set it up for the client, I liked the LXC direction, so I'm going to do that for you guys today so you can kind of see what it's about. But if you look at the other container that they have here as well, it's actually a 1 point lower on the version number. It's a 1.35, so it's also being deprecated because it's older. So you need to understand that whenever you look at these things, make sure you understand where those stand today and where they're going to be. But anyways, that's kind of where you get from going to the ZoneMinder setup. So I'm going to go through the ZoneMinder wiki here again. A really simple setup, really straightforward, and we're just going to install this on a Debian 11 Bullseye LXC container instead of just a full-on VM. But if you want to use a full-on VM, you absolutely can. If you want to install this straight on the hardware, again, you can absolutely do that. So far, I've seen really great performance with about 6 cameras on the client system that they're running that are 4K cameras, and it's doing recording constantly and things like that. And I've just set up a terabyte hard drive for them to record to, and really ZoneMinder has some nice filters set up ahead of time, kind of out of the box, I guess you'd say, to deal with space and storage and stuff like that. So really nice. So I'm going to go through this and then we'll get into the UI, but first I want to show you how to install it. Alright, I've got this Debian Bullseye container VM basically set up here, and we're going to log in, and I'm just going to log in with my credentials that I set up when I created it. And the first thing is you don't want to be the root user when you do this. So the way that I add a new user is I do add user, all one word, and then I put in the username that I want. And it's going to come back and it's going to say, okay, put in a password for that user, so we can do that. And then it's going to ask you a few questions. I usually just hit enter through these things, and at the end I hit Y and then enter, and that creates my new user. Now I want to add my user to the sudo group, so we're going to do user mod -A capital G, just like that. And then the group name we want to be a part of, which in this case is sudo, or sudo, however you want to say it. And then the name of the user, which is Brian in this case. So of course you'd use your name or your username, whatever you put in. So now I'm part of the sudo user group, which is great. The other thing about the add user command, I believe that's a little different from user add, which is also a command. When you do user add, you have to create the home directory for that user and link it to that user and all that kind of stuff. Add user, on the other hand, does that for you, which is kind of nice when you're trying to add users from the command line. So I always use the add user command, and then I add them to the groups that I want them to be a part of. In this case, sudo is the one that I wanted. So for this part, I think we're pretty much done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to log out and log back in as myself, and I'm going to log in through a regular terminal through SSH. So I'm just going to do an IPA real quick and get my IP address. So this one got set as .254, which is fine. That's right at the top of my range. So I'm going to log out of this one, and that's good. So we can just get right out of that. I'm going to jump over into a terminal. Just going to expand that up into full screen here, and I'm going to do SSH and my user at that address. I've got a couple things I need to do first. I'm going to do sudo apt update, and then I'm going to do ampersand sudo apt upgrade -y, just to make sure I've got all the latest updates and upgrades. Oh, I haven't installed sudo. That's the other thing we've got to do. So Debian does not install sudo by default. You might get an image that has it already, which is great if you do, but if you don't, it's not a big deal. You log in as your root user, which we'll just go back and do that, and then we just do apt install sudo -y. There we go. Now I'll log back out of my root user here, and we'll go back to the command line, and we'll just try that command again. So that was pretty quick. I'm just going to reboot the server now just to make sure everything gets taken care of. We'll give it about 20 seconds. It really doesn't take very long to reboot. In fact, if you can kind of see through my terminal back there, you can see that it's going through a reboot process. That's another nice thing about the LXC and LXD containers is they reboot very quickly. There's the login. So we can SSH right back in now. Took about 10 seconds, which is pretty awesome. So now we've got to go through this setup that they want us to go through. So I'm going to enlarge the font just a little bit for you guys. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go back to my setup page. And we're basically just going to follow this tutorial, which is we already did the apt install sudo. We added our user to the group. So this is kind of his method of doing that. And then he wants to set the time control to America, New York. I'm going to set it to America, Chicago. It should already be that, but we're going to go ahead and do that as well. So we're just going to highlight that. We're going to paste it in. I'm going to go out here and just get rid of New York, and Chicago is where I live. I'm in the Central Time. I don't live in Chicago, but Central Time Zone. And we'll put in the super user password there, and that's done. So it's really just kind of going through here, reading these commands, kind of making sure you understand what's going to get installed. So in this case, we're going to install some stuff. So we're going to install Apache, MariaDB server, PHP. We're going to install the Apache 2 mod lib, which you need for a lot of PHP stuff to run for PHP, and then PHP MySQL, also to have it attached to the MySQL database. So we're just going to highlight that command, and we're going to paste that in, and we'll just hit enter. And it should prompt us. It does, and we're going to say, yes, we want that. We're going to let it run, And this may take a couple of minutes, so we'll just give it a couple of minutes here. And that part's finished. Great. So I'm just going to clear the console there so it's easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. We're going to go back over here. And right here he's got a few things that don't look like commands, but they actually are things that we need to do. So we're going to do echo, and we're going to echo this into this location right here. So we're just going to highlight this, and we're going to go back down. We're just going to copy it just in case. And then we're going to paste that in and make sure it doesn't have any funny characters in the middle there. Everything looks okay to me. And I think this should be good. So this is going to basically echo this repo, which is the ZoneMinder repo, into our Etsy apt sources.list.d, and it's going to create a ZoneMinder.list. And it says LSB release command not found. So we need to install this. So we're going to do sudo apt install lsb-release. There we go. We'll go back up to that install command. One more time, we're going to try to get this. Basically this echo. It needs LSB release because LSB release gives them the information for what version of Debian we're running without us having to specify. Alright, so in order to add that echo command, we're going to do sudo su, which is going to basically prompt us for our password, and it's going to set us up as quote-unquote root, and then we're going to run that echo command. So then once you're su'd in, you're going to hit that echo command, and then you would hit enter, and that's going to add it. Now I've already done it, so I'm just going to Control-C out. I'm going to hit exit just to go back to my normal user. I'm going to clear that out. And we're going to go back here. We're going to do a wget, and then it's going to try to add this key. So once again, we're going to go back in and we're going to hit this. Now I think that this may need sudo. It's got sudo at the end to add the key. Here's the problem. I'm not paying attention. We have an error. We don't have GNU PG, GNU PG2, or GNU PG3 installed, so we need to install those things. So we're going to do sudo apt install GNU PG, GNU PG2. Alright, now we got everything installed with that. So once we did the GNU PG, we ran this command here, which is wget-o, which is output, the contents from here, and we're going to send that as apt-key add hyphen. So we're just going to basically put out the contents of this into a file called hyphen, and then we're going to add that key that's called hyphen. We could call this anything. This little hyphen could be a file name. As long as you type the same thing here, it's going to do that. So this is running basically two commands. It says go get this, and then run this command and add it as that. So we did that, and we got an OK, which is good. Alright, we're going to go back to our instructions. Now we're going to do sudo apt update and then apt install ZoneMinder for Bullseye 11. So we're just going to highlight that. We're going to copy it and paste it, and we're going to hit enter. And we're going to hit Y for yes. 131 megabytes basically that has to be pulled down and unzipped and installed. So it may take a few minutes, but we'll just give it some time. And that installation is done. That actually only took about a minute, maybe. So it wasn't too long, which is great. So we're going to go back to our instructions. You want to make sure you finish everything in the instructions. There's a few extra steps here. So we're going to enable it. And so this is the command right here. So we're just going to highlight that again. We're going to paste it in, and it's sudo systemctl enable the ZoneMinder service. So that's the first thing we want to do, is make sure it's enabled. Then we want to start the service. I'm pretty sure that'll be the next command. Yep. So we're going to highlight that one. And so once you enable a service, you do need to make sure that it's started. And we're going to hit start. And now we can do sudo systemctl status ZoneMinder. And we should see active, which we do. If you look right here, there's active. So the ZoneMinder stuff is active. We can hit Q to get out of that. We're going to clear that out. We're going to go back to our instructions. And now we need to enable a couple of things for the A2EN mods, which is PHP stuff. So we're going to just highlight, paste that in, and we're going to do the A2EN conf for ZoneMinder. And then we'll have to reload Apache 2, but I think there's one more command that we need to do before we do that. Yeah, we're going to enable one more mod there. So we're just going to highlight that command. We're going to paste it in, and this is the A2EN mod rewrite headers. This basically lets Apache do what it's supposed to do. There we go. And then it says make sure we do this to restart Apache. And we'll go back, and he's got the command right here as well. So we'll just grab this. Now he does service. I think this says use systemctl, which I prefer. So I'm going to type sudo systemctl restart Apache 2. That should have done it. And we'll hit clear. So now we should be able to go to our IP address and actually get the ZoneMinder service that should be up and running. So we're going to go to that address that we did earlier, 192.168.10.254, and then you want to do slash and then a lowercase zm for ZoneMinder. So we get this first, and if you I'll zoom this up a little bit so you can see what it is, and it's got the about, it's got the contact, you've got cookies, telemetry, all the information you want to know about privacy and things. But down here at the bottom, you see that there's the decline or the apply. So I'm just going to say apply. And then we get into the ZoneMinder interface. I'm going to zoom this back out real quick. This is 100% on the interface. We don't have any cameras or anything set up yet, obviously. And you want to set up some other storage. So when I set this up, I just set it up with 50 gigs of hard drive space. And really, that's not enough to do much recording at all when you have a high definition camera, so you want to be really careful about that. But you want to make sure you have plenty of space to do recording, so we can attach another storage device, and I do want to go through that so that I can show you how to set that up as well. But now we've got it installed, we've got the interface up, we'll go through some settings, we'll go through some setup and things like that so that you can see how everything works. It's a nice interface once you get used to it, and there's theming and some other things that you can do with it as well. But definitely we want to go through and change the passwords and set up users and things like that so you can see that as well. When you first bring up ZoneMinder, this is what you're going to see. So I'm going to zoom this back up for the folks that may be watching on their phones. So here along the top, you've got kind of this menu of options and things that you can do. So console is what we're looking at right now, and when you add your cameras, that's what you see kind of in a list or a table format here. You have your options, and really this is exactly what it says. So down the left side, you've got different sets of options, and then here is all of the options you can set. So this is basically your settings area. Now you can look at the display options, and right now we're looking at classic. There are other themes, I presume, that you can get, but right now I haven't added anything to the system. And then you have base, classic, and dark. So I don't know what classic looks like, but we can go there. And I believe if we click save, that should change how it looks. So you see it even gets a little bit bigger. And if we just go to dark, we can save. And you see that now it goes to a nice dark mode. So I'm going to leave it on dark mode because I know a lot of you guys may be watching this in the dark or at night or in the evening. And the bright colors kind of can hurt your eyes a little bit. So we're going to kind of keep this dark mode for now. But that's display. If we go to system, there's quite a bit of things here. So we've got the skin. We've already changed that. You've got CSS default stuff, so you can change that here as well. Then you've got your bandwidth defaults. So right now, high bandwidth, medium, or low. And you can set that. And it has nice little hints here at the bottom underneath each thing. So right now you can see that we've got this in English Great Britain. I'm going to change this to English US because that is where I live. As we move up, we've got opt use authorization. So basically, if you want to authenticate users, basically you have to check this box. So when you want authentication to be ready to go, when you've got your users set up and everything, you'll check this box and then you'll have to authenticate in order to let the users into the different aspects of the application that they're allowed to see. Right now, if you just go to the IP address /ZM, you're going to get right into the admin panel just like I did. So don't forget about this checkbox later. You'll want to go check it when you're ready to start setting up authentication. The auth type, there is built-in or remote. If you check remote, it'll have other things that you need to fill out in order to get the auth relay and everything like that set up. I'm just going to leave it on built-in for now. Then you do have the authorization relay, authorization hash secret, auth hash IPs, auth hash TTL. So lots of things about authentication. So authenticating into the system from other parties is there. Then you can say enable CSRF magic. So basically, I'm just going to leave these things enabled because if I turn them off, I'm not sure exactly what it's going to do. But if you want to know more, there's information that you can get for these things, and their wiki is really good. I gotta say, the ZoneMinder wiki is terrific. So if you're looking for documentation, if you have questions, definitely go check out their docs. Most of my Google searches brought me right to their wiki entries, so that means they've got some great tagging going on as well. Let's see. The API is there. Use legacy API authentication if you want to. And then event notifications. Again, if you want to get notifications about events, you can check that box, and then you'll set up what those notifications would be and which events. Google reCAPTCHA. So if you want to do that, you can check this box to set up reCAPTCHA. And there's just so many different options here. And again, I could go through all of these options, but it's better if you guys kind of jump in and dig in and read about some of these, because a lot of them don't affect everybody. But some of it's about different access token options and things like that. System shutdown. So basically allow admin users to power off the system. You may want to turn this off because you may not want people turning off your cameras, admin users or not. Hopefully you're only making it trusted people, your admins, but you just never know. So maybe that's a bad thing. Time zone. So we've already kind of set this once, but let's go set it again just to make sure that we're getting the right one set. Again, I'm in America, Chicago. So that's the one that I want to set. And I don't know why Chicago doesn't come in alphabetical order here. It's interesting. But I do tend to find it up here. Yeah, right here. So I think it groups them by the GMT time zone, but that's the one that I want right there. Your fast delete. So delete only event database records for speed, I guess. How often in seconds filters are reloaded in ZoneMinder? So that's 5 minutes basically to reload your filters. Execute interval 60 seconds. So it's going to basically check every 60 seconds and execute filters that you have. And filters are the way that you say, here's how I want you to do certain things inside of the software, and use these filters as the way of detecting what should be acted upon. So that's why they call them filters. Your maximum restart delay. I mean, just so many little things in here. Again, lots of things that you may want to set up, but I don't know that you're going to want to. I'll just tell you the ones that I'm going to set. So we did the time zone and a couple of things there. Let's see. Checking for updates is auto-checked, and I like that. I want it to stay like that because I want it to let me know when there's updates available. Telemetry data is unchecked. If you don't mind sending telemetry data, go ahead and check that box. And then the telemetry interval is basically a formula here so that it sends it so many days, basically. Let's see. If you need an update check proxy, you can put the proxy in there as well. Just be aware of that. So that's really all of your settings for this part. I'm going to hit save because I did make some changes there. As we go down, you get into config, and again, a lot of stuff. So do you want to see the timestamp on the capture? And yes, most of the time you do. That means it puts the date and the time of when that recording was being made. Timestamp code character, so %. A lot of these things you don't need to change unless you really know what you're doing. I wouldn't mess with them, honestly. CPU extensions, fast image blends, OPT adaptive skip. So again, if you guys know what these are, optical adaptive skip, just feel free to check those or uncheck those if you don't want them. Maximum suspend time, just lots of options here that, again, probably more than worthwhile for you to go read the wiki about what they do and how they should be set. But I'm going to go with the defaults for now. This is kind of to me the best way to start, and then go in and tweak a little at a time, make a change, go save, see how it does. And then as you make changes and you realize, okay, I messed something up, it's a lot easier to go back to the last thing you did versus having to figure out, okay, I just made 35 changes, which one is the one that broke it? Default aspect ratio, you might want to change this one just depending. If you know your cameras are widescreen, then you might want to set this to 16:9 or 16:10 or you know, whatever you've got. It defaults to 4:3, so it's kind of up to you. But in my experience, it also, as I added the cameras, it detected what those aspect ratios were, and it set that appropriately. So I didn't make any changes here, I don't believe. So we'll go back up. There's an API. So if you want to add API endpoints and get tokens, you can do that. I'm not going to do that today. You can have multiple servers and you can tie those servers together. So again, if you have those things, you can add them here and kind of set that up. Storage, we're going to come back to because I do want to add storage. So I want you to see how to add storage as well. And really kind of what it looks like when you're doing it here from the UI. Now, how you add storage to the physical machine or the VM that you're using, you need to understand how to do that based on whatever you're using for that service. But once you've added it there, you need to add it here as well. And it has to have certain permissions. That's why I want to go through it so that it can hold your recordings. Web, so that basically this is like the nav bar type, whether you want normal or collapsed, and then the web title, so you can change some different thing, kind of white labeling your system. So you can go through here and kind of check these out. There's just a bunch of things that you can check or uncheck for your web interface and basically how it works. There's not a lot there that I really think you need to mess with unless you just want to. Images, I didn't really mess with on the client system that I set up, but you may want to change some things about the way that the images are being saved. If there's thumbnails and things like that that you're grabbing or anything, you might want to check this and go through and check these settings as well. Make sure that it's got the right settings for what you're trying to accomplish. Logging, I didn't mess with logging either, but there is logging, and you can kind of go through and say, I want this to be a different level of logging so that I understand what's going on with my system. The log level file, log level web log. I mean, just so many different things here about logging that you can set up so you can really understand what's happening. And a lot of times it's good to start off with heavier logging and learn by looking at those logs and then say, okay, I need to filter these things out as too much stuff, or it's not relevant most of the time. I don't need to see it. But you can go in and set up your logging as well. Network wise. So again, whatever you want for your HTTP version is up to you. 1.1 is probably better than 1.0, honestly. HTTP UA, so the user agent that ZoneMinder uses to identify itself, you can change that. HTTP timeout, the streaming port basically that you want to use, and the RTSP port if you want to change it for some reason and you want to send out an RTSP stream, you can. The RTP port is set there. I believe that's RTMP. I could be wrong. And then again, the max RTMP port right there. Email, again, if you want to get notifications from the system, you need to set up the email stuff. So you need to go through this and you need to know what your email settings are. So basically here's the message address, the message subject, the message body. And then down here is where you would set your email host. So there's uploading. You can upload the video files that you're recording basically to another server. Again, here's your upload host, the upload port, the upload user, the upload password. And then up here you can say whether it's FTP or SFTP, basically to do your upload. So you can kind of set all that stuff up and get everything ready. But yeah, I think this is a pretty important thing if you want to keep these things and you want to send them over the network to another server so that you can keep them in long-term storage. Then setting up an FTP server is a good idea, and getting everything ready is the best way to go on that one. X10, I'm not an X10 user, so I don't know anything about this. I didn't mess with it. So again, with the high, the medium, and the low stuff on the B/Ws, I didn't mess with any of those things. I haven't changed any of those things. I'm going to leave it to you to go check out the wiki and understand what this is for and why you might want to use it. And then users, of course. We have users here, so we're going to add a user because we have the admin. That's the default. And we actually want to go into the admin, and we want to create a strong password for our admin user. And then we want to set our admin's language. And their home view is going to be Montage. I think that's how you can specify the home view. So Montage is what shows you the cameras in the grid. Montage Review is how you see the recordings. And we'll go through these here in just a minute. But I'm going to hit save for my admin there. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a new user. And we're going to give this new user a username. And that's going to be Brian in this case. And Brian's password is going to be a strong password. And I'm going to set my language again. Make sure you set the appropriate language for your users. And home view again is Montage in my case. That's fine. Is this user enabled? Yes. And do they have a max bandwidth, high, medium, or low? So you can set this if you have like 27 users that all be using it at once, you might want to set that to medium or low instead of high, depending on the bandwidth capabilities of your network. In my case, high is fine. Over here you have stream information, whether they can view the stream or not, whether they can view events or edit events. So you might want to make sure you're setting these pretty appropriately. View snapshots or edit snapshots. Control, whether they have view or edit of controls. Again, view, whether they can view monitors or edit monitors. View or edit groups. System, they probably don't need access to. And then devices, you probably want to put view on. And then if there's any restricted monitors, which we haven't set any up yet, you would list them here in this. This turns into a wide text box, and it just doesn't look like that right now. And then the API, whether it's enabled for that user or not, and we'll hit save. And now we have 2 users in the system, and basically this is where you would want to go back to system and enable your authentication. So don't forget to go do that so that your users have to log in order to get into the system, and they can't just jump right into this view by default. So that's options. We're going to jump over to logs here real quick, and you can see what I'm getting in the logs already. So this is where you can kind of look and say, you know what, I need to go back to logs in the option setup and kind of define what I want to be more clear. Groups, so here you can set up groups and who the group, what the groups of monitors are. So if you have monitors in more than one location, so maybe you have an office building and it has like the first floor, second floor, third floor, or maybe you have accounting and sales and things like that. Just depends on how you have it set up, but you can group those monitors here so that you can set that up. Filters, again, this is how you take actions on different events and cameras and recordings in your system. So you probably want to set up your filters. Cycling, so basically you can cycle through different cameras and you can set this up to be on a time basis, which is pretty cool. So you kind of get the whole camera and it cycles through that camera, and you kind of set that up in a way that you can then add to your montage. Your montage is your grid layout of your cameras, and it is pretty customizable, but it has some nice defaults as well. So we'll go through that once we add a couple of cameras. Montage review is for reviewing your recordings. And then audio events, if you have audio set up, it will also have audio events that you can use to kind of look at different things that happen based on audio triggers if you set those up as well. So up here at the top, you get some nice little things and you get some information. So right here you can see your storage default 9%. That's my storage currently. This is why we want to add storage at some point. And then you have your information here about what's going on. So you have the database, which is 7 of 151, and load, which is basically nothing right now, which is great. Now I'm running this on 1 core with 4 gig of RAM. On the client system, I think I gave it 8 cores and I gave it like 16 gigs of RAM. So yeah, I wanted to make sure they had plenty of memory because again, we're running a lot of high frame rate and 4K streams that I wanted to make sure that everything's good there. Again, a terabyte to record events and data. So definitely want to make sure your system is set up for recording and doing what you want to do. But yeah, that's kind of the brief overview of the user interface here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go set up storage so that we have a place to put the recordings for the cameras that we add to the system. So next up is setting up our storage. All right, I wanted to show you what I'm setting up. So I'm back inside of Proxmox and I'm just adding a resource, basically a mount point to the container that I created. So I'm going to give it 500 gigs of space there. And then I'm just creating a mount point called /mnt/recording. I'm going to go ahead and create that. And it's set as a backup option. I don't need that in this case because I'm going to be using it for backups for Proxmox. Just going to go ahead and create that. It just takes a second for it to be added. I don't even think I have to restart the container in this case. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to go back to my terminal. And I'm going to do ls/mnt. And you can see there's my recording spot that we just created, which is exactly what we're looking for. So if we go back into our UI, we're going to add more storage. So we're going to go to the options. We're going to make sure that we're on the storage tab here. And we're basically just going to add new storage. We're just going to click on add. And the first thing it wants is just a name. So this is just recordings is fine. And then the path is /MNT/recording, and make sure I didn't put an S on the end of that. Yeah, just recording, no S. And then we're going to go ahead and put a slash, so it'll put it into that folder. The URL is just /recording. Should be fine. You can make this kind of whatever you want. If you want to make it like /video, whatever you feel like, just put a slash at the end as well. Now this is a little confusing. The server says remote, no specific server, but you'll see you don't really have any other choices there. But here you want it to be a type as local. And then on the schema, this is really kind of up to you how you do this. I just leave it on medium. I think the deep and the shallow just means like how verbose is the actual path that it's going to create for what it's doing for the recording, the way that it labels the recordings essentially. Finally, and then do deletes, yes, enabled, yes. So both of these things, we want the recording space to be enabled, and we do want to be able to do deletes. So we're going to hit save. So now you can see we've got two different places to save, and we can look here to see what we've got. For some reason, this is only showing 40 gigs. I'll just reboot the server just to be sure that it takes effect. There we go. So I did have to reboot the server in order to get it to take effect and actually recognize that storage, but now we have it set up correctly where it sees it as 500 gigabytes, which is what I wanted. And we've got our location here, and we've got it set up. Now, you've done step one. You've set up a place for your recordings. Now we need to set up some cameras, and when we set up the cameras, we'll tell them where to store the recordings that they create. So in this case, we're going to go back to console, and we're going to add a new camera. So we're just going to click on the add button right here. And depending on your camera and how you can get to the stream of the camera depends on how you set this up. So I'm just going to label this camera as street and recycle. So this is going to be the camera that faces the street next to my recycle bins outside of my house. I don't really need to add any notes. The server, I'm just going to leave it as none. You could do auto if you want to. And then for me, the type is going to be FFmpeg. I'm going to set up a Railink RLC 410 camera here. That's it's a bullet camera that's PoE. And I'm going to leave this on this setup here. So as you're looking for different cameras on how to set them up for ZoneMinder, again, type in your camera model and then ZoneMinder into like Google or Hoogle, and it will give you results that will probably take you to the ZoneMinder wiki. Or at the very least, it'll give you results for somebody who's set up that camera in the past, and you can just go grab the information that you need to get everything set correctly. For me, I'm going to go now to the source tab here on the left, and we need to put in the source path, and in my case, I'm going to set this to UDP, and then my source path is going to be an RTSP stream, so I'm going to go grab that, copy it, and paste it, and then we'll fix a couple of things about what that looks like. Alright, so I've pasted in the RTSP stream for a Railink camera. Now, a lot of the RTSP streams are very similar to this, so you need to make sure you're getting the right one for your camera type and make sure that you've got it formatted correctly. But in my case, it's RTSP:// admin, or the username for the user. In this case, I'm just going to use admin generically for now. And then colon, and then the password that you set up for your camera for Railink. So you need to make sure when you set that password, you keep it and remember it. But then you're going to do @ and then the IP address of the camera, :554, which is the RTSP port. So unless you've changed that somewhere else in the camera settings, this is probably correct. And then H.264, and I believe in my case I need 265. And then preview 01 and then _main. So there's a main and then there's a sub that both can be done and used with these cameras. So I'm going to just kind of keep this the way it is. I'm going to switch out the password for the actual password here in just a minute. Then you have some options that you can set on these as well, and a few other things down the way. So it just depends again on the camera. You really need to look those up and understand what your camera needs in ZoneMinder. But that way you can kind of make sure you get everything set. The other thing you want to do is probably set the appropriate resolution for the camera. So I'm going to set this as 1920 by 1080. And the aspect ratio, we're just going to leave the orientation normal. I don't need to flip it or anything like that, but you can see there are other options if you need to reverse it or flip it over or anything like that. And then whether or not the deinterlacing is disabled or enabled. So again, not something I need to turn on as far as I know. So this once I go grab these options real quick, I think that will be the end of what we need. and we'll save this and go take a look at it. But first we'll have to set the storage. So once we've got everything set up, we want to set where we want to store our recording. So the storage area here, default means the default drive that you've got the operating system set on. So if you installed this on a 4 terabyte drive, feel free to use default. In my case, I set up a special place for the recordings, and it's called recordings. So I'm just going to select that. And then frames plus analysis, probably fine. There's nothing for you to keep or disable there if you want it to actually do recording. But basically saving JPEGs, you can save frames only. You can save analysis images only if accessible. So same thing. It says only if available. So I'm just going to leave that alone. Video buffer, you can say encode, camera pass through, disabled. I'm just going to leave it disabled for now. And then again, optional options that was already set. I'm just going to leave that. And then if you don't want to store the audio, you should make sure this is unchecked. If you want to store the audio with it, you'll have to check this box. It depends on the camera. It could create problems. It may not. So it's kind of up to you whether you check this box or not. I'll leave it unchecked for now, and then we'll save that. I'm going to go put in the correct credentials, and we'll save it, and I'll be right back. All right, after a little bit of work and redoing some passwords, make sure your password does not have the @ symbol in it with an RTSP stream, because the @ symbol is used for other things. So I had a little problem with that, so I had to go change my password to something different. Additionally, with Railink, make sure you check out the ZoneMinder documentation and really hit Google, because you can also use the RTMP streams. If you see tearing or smearing in your images and in your video, you may want to do that and kind of check that out as well. So here we can see a little bit more information. I'm going to zoom this back up for you guys. I zoomed it out just so I could see a little bit more stuff there. But you can see right here, we've got events, the hour, the day of the week, kind of just a different information that kind of spreads across the screen here. And really there's not a lot going on because there's just not a lot happening right now. But you can see how many kilobytes per second are going across my network for this camera. And you can see the information that I've got here set up for that camera and that it's capturing and where it's recording. So it's storing it on that recordings area that I wanted. And then if you just hover, you get a little bit of a pop out, I guess is what you'd call it, for your video. And then of course you can click to actually go into that camera, and you can see it bigger on the screen, and you can kind of see what's happening out here, and you can see my gate and my trash cans and stuff. But this is really just an area outside my house that's kind of hidden from everything, and there's no windows, so I like to have a camera where I can detect anything that's happening. Navigation is pretty standard in here, so not a big thing. I'm going to go ahead and add another camera, and then we will check out kind of what it looks like when we've got 2 cameras, and kind of start setting up the montage and montage review stuff. So that you guys can see that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click on add. So I was just going to add another camera manually, but I wanted to show you that since I'm adding another camera that's almost exactly the same as the one that I've already got here, there is a nice feature here called clone. So if you just check the little box down here on this end to select the row, because there'll be multiple rows once you add multiple cameras, you can click on clone. It's going to bring you in, and you see here it calls it Clone of Streets Recycle. So I want to rename this, and that's going to be Driveway Alley. And then I want to jump down to my source and just change the source, and really all of the other settings are going to stay the same. So there's nothing else for me to change except for the address for the source. So I'm going to jump down here, and you'll see it's on an RTMP stream instead of RTSP, just because it got rid of that tearing. And I want to put in that source IP address. So I need to find that from my application here. And if you can imagine that, it's only 1 number off from the other camera. These PoE cameras are really great. And now I'm really set. I can just double check and make sure my storage is set, and it does. It has recordings. I did set it from disabled to camera pass-through, just so that this system isn't having to do any kind of transcoding. So I'm just going to hit save. And it takes just a second, like I said, for it to show up. Sometimes you have to refresh manually, but we'll give it a minute and see if it shows up on its own. So I went up and manually refreshed, and now you can see I've got both cameras here. I don't know if this just isn't refreshing because of a setting I might have here in Firefox, but now we've got the second camera up as well, so you can see my driveway and the alleyway out here and kind of my side yard that's going on. So now we can jump over to the montage view, and you can see that this is super zoomed in. Just really kind of a crazy level of zoomed in. So you can change the way that it scales, and you've got a few different things that you can do here. So there's freeform. So if you just want to go this way, it makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to zoom this back out, but you've got this layout option. You've got the scaling option. You've got width and height and just so many different things. And a lot of them are set to auto. So I'm just going to scroll back out here to get this back to 100%. And then on the scale, I'm just going to pick 2 wide. And you see it tries to set them side by side, but it's still pretty tall, so that's just not quite enough. So I'm going to go 3 wide. Still a little bit too big, but we can also adjust how this lays out as far as the size of the frames. So instead of doing full size, I'm going to go over and I'm going to select half size. So now you can see it fits a little bit better. And then we can come back and we can try 2 wide. And there we go. They overlap a little bit, I imagine, but we've got pretty much my 2 video screens there showing up. And as you add more cameras, you can switch that to 3 wide, 4 wide, and so on to create your grid or your montage area. But now I can monitor both of my cameras here in real time. And then as you get events, you can switch over to the montage review. And you can start looking for events that have happened and start playing those things back. So again, you use these filters here at the top to do this. Now, if you don't like all of this stuff here at the top when you're looking at it, again, it depends on the user you log in as once you set that up too, as to whether or not you'll have all of that. But you have these little controls at the right where you can click to kind of hide this stuff here at the top and just kind of make some space on the screen for your video. And you see, even after I came back, it looks a little bit better now that I'm on the montage page again. And here, so you can have this kind of as your updated monitoring. And then if you want to see something full screen, you just click and it'll bring it up full screen. And then you've got the back arrow if you want to go back out of that to see everything again. So you can kind of see what's going on and get some information about this. And if you need those filters, you just click the little down arrow to expand this back out and start filtering things down again. So that's a very brief overview of ZoneMinder and what you can do with ZoneMinder. I've got some more cameras I want to add. Like I said, it uses very little resource. So if we go back and look right now with 2 cameras going, again, I've got 4 gigs of RAM and 1 CPU. And here's what it looks like. And I'll zoom this up for you guys that are on the phone. It's using 34% of 1 CPU. And it's only using 37% of that 4 gigs. So about 1.4 gigs to run that thing. A little bit of swap usage, not much, and really that's kind of all we've got really running right there. So overall, I mean, not a heavy user of all of the information that you see. So I'll kind of show you the charts here that we get out of Proxmox for what it's doing. But yeah, I mean, it runs pretty lean whenever you run it, especially in an LXC container like this, and it seems to be doing pretty well. I did try to set up Shinobi originally, and I set it up in an LXC container just like this. And I noticed really, really high CPU usage very quickly, and the RAM was getting ramped up very quickly. And I had only added like maybe 2 or 3 cameras at that point for this client. And I thought, this just isn't going to work. That's too much for what I'm trying to provide to them. So I went out and looked for other options. And it's when I checked out Blue Iris, just because I thought, well, that may be the only thing I can find that'll really work. And I thought, what? I had ZoneMinder a long time ago, and I haven't used it in a while. And I just thought to myself, you need to go back and try that again and give it another shot and see how it does. And I'll tell you, I've been really happy with the performance of it so far. I'll keep monitoring it. You guys get out there and try it out. If you like it, let me know in the comments. If you have issues with it, of course, check out the wiki. Go to their forums. It seems like an active community and a lot of people with a lot of knowledge that have set things up in ZoneMinder who really like it. So definitely get out there and ask questions and let them know that you're having an issue. I'm sure they can help you solve it if possible. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.